I suspect that you're both intrigued and excited about what platforms like ChatGPT can do in terms of supporting teachers, but also into the realms of assessment and personalized learning. And we just want to meet you where you're at currently, really, with your thinking about what the opportunities might be, the risks might be, the hype, and how you
Okay.
think it impacts. Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course. So um, this is a book here. Is that in focus?
It is, yes.
Are people aware of this book?
Not yet, no.
Well, you don't need to buy it then because you've seen it. And so this was a book I wrote 6 years ago
Mm.
about the AI revolution coming into schools and colleges, and how and the subtitle there is, as you can see, will artificial intelligence enrich or infantilize education and humanity? So, and you can see there how there is the human and then um, a computer brain, the
Mm.
left brain and the right brain, and how in the book here, I take. I mean that is a starting point. Is that in focus? Tell me when that's in
It
focus.
says Benz and Co. I can see that.
Okay, so that's a picture of the Mercedes-Benz factory where they um, first got the internal combustion engine into cars, and you can see there a horse-drawn carriage, and you can see the chassis of an automobile. And I'm saying that this is the point that we are now at with AI. That's really what the whole book is about. That we are, just like the people in that image there. Obviously, they're all men. Um, so that's just one way the workplace has changed. But they knew they were onto something that was going to be transformative, but they had no idea how could they, in 1884, how the world was going to be transformed by the internal combustion engine. And what I'm saying is that that's where we are with AI. We are in a huge state of ignorance. We don't know how education or the world is going to be changed by AI. We just know that it's going to be something, the biggest thing that's hit civilization. And that I say in this book that it will be bigger than the internal combustion engine. So, however much your lives have all been transformed by the internal combustion engine and the lives of your parents and grandparents and great grandparents and great great grandparents, probably not that much further back, have been transformed by that. This is going to be bigger. Point one. Point two, we don't really know yet fully exactly how it's going to change. So, how do you want to conduct this? Are you going to be asking me questions and I'm responding?
Yes, I've framed them as discussion points just so that I don't expect you to have all the answers, but it clearly is evident that you've put a lot of thinking into this. Before we do that, Sir Anthony, I'd just like Jaisal to read out your biography and a mention for me
My
as
goodness,
well.
I'm going to. Can I forbid that? I'm into a new. No, Jason, you probably worked this out and probably been standing in front of your mirror this
Well,
morning.
people need to know who you are, Sir Anthony, though.
I've spent my life trying to work out who I am. So if people can know who I am after Jasel's brilliant introduction, you've achieved something that in 10 seconds that I haven't in my life. Okay, I'll shut up.
All right. If you'll permit her to say a few words, I think it's important if you're humorous. Jaisal.
Yeah, I think we can't put that into a few seconds, what you have done through your life. But yes, we'll try. We'll try our best to
Jason, can I
showcase.
say I'm not yet dead, by the way? Just can I point that out? And with luck, I'll survive for the next hour or just short of.
Sure, sure. Thanks. So I'll move on to the biography for both Sir Anthony Seldon and Richard Foster-Fletcher. So, Sir Anthony Francis Seldon is a prominent British educator, contemporary historian, and author known for his significant contributions to education and political history. Sir Anthony is currently the headmaster of Epsom College. He previously served as the 13th Master of Wellington College and was Vice Chancellor of the University of Buckingham from 2015 to 2020. A prolific author, Sir Anthony has written or edited more than 45 books, including political biographies of every British Prime Minister from John Major to Boris Johnson. His works are noted for their insightful analysis and detailed research, contributing significantly to contemporary historical literature. In education, Sir Anthony is widely recognized for his innovative approaches. He introduced happiness and well-being classes at Wellington College, advocating for a holistic approach to education that encompasses emotional and social development alongside academic achievement. His leadership in promoting the international revolutionize and personalised learning has been influential in modernizing educational practices in the UK and beyond. Beyond his educational roles, Sir Anthony co-founded the Centre for Contemporary British History and the Charity Action for Happiness. He's also a governor of the Royal Shakespeare Company and serves on the boards of several other charities and educational bodies. Knighted in 2014 for services to education and modern political history, Sir Anthony continues to be a leading voice in educational reform and historical scholarship. His recent focus includes integrating AI into education to enhance personalized learning and resilience in students. Thank you for giving me the chance to put in the introduction in a few words. I hope that it is good for all of us to understand what a great work you have been doing. And moving on, everybody knows Richard, but those who are new to this session might know that Richard is an artificial intelligence advisor, author, and speaker, and a top voice on LinkedIn. Drawing on his experience of working in blue chip technology companies, he founded MKAI.org, an organization dedicated to the responsible implementation of AI. He also hosts the Boundless podcast. He speaks about AI inclusivity, digital ethics, and the future of work, delivering lectures at the LSE, UCL, Oxford University, and Imperial College London, and providing evidence for UK Parliament. Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Jaisal, for preparing those. So, Sir Anthony, what we'll do, we'll speak for maybe 10, 15 minutes now. And then what I would ask for everybody else here today is you are very much participants rather than audience. So please do go into the chat and first of all, mention where you're joining us from today or where you associate yourself with in terms of a country so we can see what sort of global representation we have. Put your LinkedIn if you like, your URL so people know where to find you. But then let's get chatting in there as well. So please do think about questions that you have for Sir Anthony, because Jaisal will go around the chat and, like I say, about a few minutes from now and have a look at picking up some of the comments and some of the questions. And if there are things that we can ask of Sir Anthony, then we'll certainly put that through. So Pakistan, UK, and the Philippines, we're off to a great start. Sir Anthony, what can we learn from history, in your opinion, that actually will help us to navigate AI in education going forward?
So I think that's absolutely the right question. And what else can we learn from than from history? And with the British government, I'm strongly encourage the consideration of history in decision-making processes. So I am the historian of the British Prime Minister, and I have been honorary historian at Downing Street, and think that history is often overlooked. It should be as important as economics and statistics and science in the consideration of policy. It's difficult to draw much on history when we don't know much more other than this is bigger than any other technological innovation of the last 25 years. And I think it's the biggest since the printing press. So in that book, it's called The Fourth Education Revolution. You all will have been wondering what the first three are. And if I say the third was the discovery of the printing press, you can ask me, if you're interested, what number one and number two were. So I think we can learn that it is bigger than anything in the last 400 or 500 years. We can learn that technology drives education, that the shape of universities, colleges, schools today is determined by the technological possibilities of the eras in which these were developed. Lecture halls of a size that the human voice would carry to, classrooms of a size that a teacher can manage and that the economic system can afford to produce the numbers of teachers to teach. And all that is going to change. Every facet of teaching and learning and assessment and school organization and pastoral and mental health care will change, and registration and finance and accounting and law and catering, every single aspect of school life, co-curricular as much as curricular, will change with AI. And what we need to do is to work together to try and ensure that it is in the interests of all young people. And we need to ponder the most beguiling question that there can be at the moment, which is, what is human intelligence? What is anything left? When the machines now in 50 years' time, they'll be 1,000,000 times quicker and smarter. Is there anything left that human beings uniquely can do? What is the human residual? What does it mean to be human? And how can we be configuring education systems to celebrate and highlight and celebrate the human?
So I will ask you what those first two were, if you can share them with us.
Richard, this is purely my own making up, but I think it is the beginning of learning. Now, very roughly, in a schematic kind of way, we might say that Homo sapiens' predecessors began learning roughly some 5 million years ago about how to copy each other by watching an observation. You are copying behaviors that might have been 5 million years ago. Far more historically accurately, we would say roughly 5,000 years ago, as nomadic peoples began to settle, in particularly on the estuaries of 5 or 4 or 5 leading rivers, including the Nile and the Tigris, Euphrates. Civilizations began along the banks, and people were no longer moving around. And as people settled down in fixed locations, so schools or places of learning sprung up about passing on this organized knowledge. So that was roughly 5,000 years ago. And it's intriguing if you look at the early design of those institutions, with a teacher in the front and students sitting at desks in front of them and learning about basic law and barter and accounting, and about what one needs to make a society work. And that was, so the first was beginning of learning, second beginning of organized learning, and the third, with the printing press, is the beginning of factory learning, in the current model that we have, and that was roughly some 500, so 5,000,000, 5,500. It's very schematic, but it gives a sense of how big and powerful this current revolution is for it to be on that scale.
That's quite a framing, isn't it, in terms of its significance? To what extent then does this suggest that we need something of a great reset then to education?
Well, we do, Richard and everybody, and it's very hard. If we look at how change happens in history, change happens as a result of major disruptive events. Now, it could be a physical event, it could be a flood, it could be a volcanic eruption. It could be an global epidemic, such as the Black Death or the Spanish flu epidemic of 1917 to 1919, or COVID. We haven't yet fully begun to see the impact of COVID. It can be an economic downturn, such as the Great Depression of the late 20s, early 30s, and it can be war. So if we look at the last century, the impact of the First World War, 1914 to 1918, on medicine, on science, on technology, on governmental systems, on industrial organization was vast, and it did bleed in to a revolution in education the world over. Education became a right, a need, and at older and older ages for young people. The war did show, as had an earlier British war, the Boer War of 1899 to 1902, how illiterate and uneducated, but also how physically malnourished the population was. So war is a great stimulant. So if we look at your question, Richard, what will it take for schools, colleges, universities, society to reorganize itself? There are such powerful forces of inertia resisting change. It may be 25 years before the impact of AI, with its vast benefits, but also risks but let's concentrate on the benefits for learners. It may be that it's going to take that long, and longer perhaps in those countries where protection of worker rights is more entrenched, and there's more resistance to change, and more fear of change, and more lack of trust of leaders, whether political leaders or education leaders. So I think it's hard to say, but the technology will rapidly outstrip the way that schools have adapted themselves to it.
It's interesting you talk about some of the workers and the unions, and of course that's a major factor. A good friend of mine drives an underground train, and if you're not aware of this, makes a six-figure income doing this as well. And that is relatively simple to use automation and AI to drive that train, but there is no chance that they are upseating any of those drivers anytime soon. They are absolutely locked in by the unions and the contracts. So it's not...
And one can understand that. We need to, in Britain, the teaching force feels insufficiently valued by government and insufficiently trusted, and the drive for exams has squeezed out teacher autonomy, teacher flair, teacher creativity, teacher initiative, so that if we can say that union resistance might be a block, a bigger block would be government intransigence or failure to appreciate and understand that teachers are naturally concerned about their working lives and their incomes and their job satisfaction. I think introduce it well, and teacher workload will decline, teacher contact time will rise, and teacher ingenuity will return.
I want to ask you about disruption, a term that lots of businesses and entrepreneurs like to use. Do you think it's equal across schools, 16 to 18, higher education, or do you see a subset of education being impacted faster by generative AI than others?
So it's partly an affordability question. What can the schools afford? What can the students' families afford? There are, I think, in general, Richard, the older the student, the more scope there is. In part because their own capability at using the technology will be more advanced, and the applications, the material that's available, better suited for younger children, age 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up to 11 and through 11. The role for the teacher as a mediator and as a human force will be greater. I'm thinking also of the work of Jonathan Haidt, whose book is on the bookshelf behind me, and his work about the damage of social media, in particular on the brains of young people aged between 11, 12, 13, 14. The damage is particularly concentrated on them at a level, at ages when there's a lot of rewiring, reprocessing going on in the child's brain, and the need for human contact is at the greatest. So I think for all these reasons and more, I think the older student will be more exposed to these technologies. But that doesn't mean they're not very considerable roles for younger children. I think that we need to ground young people in the warmth and uniqueness of human interaction. We've known ever since Bowlby, for those familiar with the work of Bowlby on attachment, how much the infant needs the secure attachment of the mother or a mother figure, and that for those young people who have a secure attachment, that they know that they are loved, that they're held, that they're secure. And I think in the same way that as learners, but I can't base this in the same way on scientific evidence, that for younger children, the formation of relationships with a secure teacher, a loving, steady, kind, present, non-angry teacher, that is important in the formation of a maturation of that sense of security. We know this is very hard for adults who didn't have secure attachment when infants for the rest of their life. And my sense is also, and I think that Jonathan Haidt's work, I assume you're all familiar with Jonathan Haidt's work. Can you
We can just put that in the chat. Yeah, if anybody wants to mention.
I just hang on there because it's so important. I'm just going to just get his book just to show you.
Not a virtual background.
Sorry, I'm talking from my study at college. So
Yes.
That is the book. If anyone wants to screenshot that. Just on your phones, if you may well know it. It is probably
Just popping in here, yeah.
It's the most important book to have been published on education this year. And although, I think personally that he's overly pessimistic about the positive impacts of social media. But so you asked me a question about what ages. I think that the positives expand and expand the older the child gets, for the reasons stated.
Yes. And as you mentioned as well, money, if you're paying for university, it certainly heightens your interest in the outcomes. It's not cheap these days. Thank you for sharing that. When you were speaking as well, it prompted me to check the stats on the Udemy courses, and it seems to vary. But the consensus is that 85 to 95% of these types of online self-learning courses don't get finished. So you can immediately see the impact of the human in the educational loop when you see those sorts of numbers. And an AI can never convey the passion, the experience, the love, the joy that a teacher can. And Sir Anthony, I'm sure you've seen this as well, that it's the impact of the teacher that keeps, for example, UK college students coming to class. It's nothing else.
Okay, I'm going to just qualify that a bit.
Mm.
And while agreeing with you, I think that for those vast numbers, very high percentage for different forms of neurodiversity, special education needs, and disabilities, AI has a huge role to play. The lack of, whereas it would be much better to have a human teacher for every child who has special education needs, and indeed sometimes special geographic needs, that they live on islands or live in remote parts of the country where there aren't schools at all, or they're not schools that have a range of specialist teachers, then AI has a particular role to play. It personalizes itself onto that special education need of that person, or the disability of the person, or the geographic or social or economic exclusion of that person. And it can give real-time personalized teaching in the way that if there was the money, everyone would have in a class, in a physical space together. But you can't do that because there'll never be enough money to pay for teachers, for a one-on-one teacher, specialist teacher for every child with learning needs. So, of course, social relationships are foundational for our well-being, our learning, our happiness, our sanity. But that doesn't mean that they're not massive benefits, including for the most disadvantaged from these technologies, and linguistic difficulties too. I mean, for those who have particular linguistic needs, they're coming to a country. So many, I mean, refugees are going to grow in number, and the language of the country might not afford that possibility. They can have that personalized teaching in the language that they can understand.
Picking up on one of your points there, I think it was Robert Hitchcock's Sir Anthony in our class whose phone would ring every single evening that the homework was due the next day. But the question he was being asked by all of us wasn't, can you help me? Or what do we, can I cheat? It was, I don't really understand what we've been asked to do. And that's just an immediate opportunity for artificial intelligence to be able to help clarify the task and dig into what's really being asked here.
Yeah,
sure. But let's not avoid the big question, Sir Anthony, which I think I sort of can see where you're going with this, is to what extent is it broken in the first place at the moment, education?
It's not broken for many, is it? I don't think it's a black and white. I don't think that. I think education is locked into an ideological structure, and few can see outside it. they do think that education is all about maximization of cognitive intelligence. And okay, we'll throw a bit of music, a bit of sport in, a bit of character stuff in, but frankly, it's all a bit of a distraction from the main thing, which is to get the young people through the exams, and that's job done. But it isn't, and I mean that's an ideological framing. It's a bubble, but it's not what education is. It's not what the word means, and so it's not broken. It's pretty good in many countries, but it could be much better.
Thank you. We certainly hope that AI is a tide that lifts all ships in education. So I'd like to speak to you more about that in just a moment, along with your thoughts on teaching, learning, and assessment, the different aspects that AI can impact. And I'll probably ask you whether or not you'd actually even get rid of exams in just a moment. But before all that, perhaps, Jaisal, if you don't mind, you could just catch us up on some of the comments from the chat. And if there's one or two questions that would be good just to put out to Sir Anthony.
Absolutely. I think we have a couple of comments, and the first comment comes from Henry Gateman, and he said that interesting various comments from our children. I mean, he's mentioning about his children who are young, 20 and 17, indicate that the current educational system does not match the modern world before really even considering the huge and accelerating changes caused by AI. And he also has mentioned that the focus on book learning, exams, and learning things are quickly out of date and can be readily researched does not seem at all appropriate to the current learners. So this is one of his comments. And there was a very sweet comment that came in while I think Sir Anthony was talking about the human relationship between the teacher and the child, is that a teacher can hug. So I think that shows the connection and about the feelings that you could build on when there is a human actual being there with regards to education. And we also have another one from Viorica. A few years ago, I used to deliver workshops across UK FE institutions called Make Them Laugh and They Will Learn for ESOL teachers. I'm so happy to see that all this time I was working along similar lines as Sir Anthony. Our current project at New City College is about AI and FE teachers' wellness. So these are some of the comments.
So let me just pick up on three things, and they're very wonderful comments. Fear, first point, fear has damaged education, and so much of education in Britain and globally is driven by fear of failure, fear of inspection regimes, fear of the many regulations that come in, compliance. We all have to comply, and fear is corrosive of education. And one way it is fear of lawsuits. And so the point there about hugging and physical contact is extraordinarily important, but because of a minority of adults who have inappropriately touched and hugged children, then one is not allowed to hug or have physical contact. So that's an example of conventions, practices, human behavior being dictated by the bad, not by the good. Now, the deep and profound damage that's been done to some children because of physical and sexual abuse by adults is deeply distressing, and much of it still unearthed. But it is a shame that the need that children have to feel accepted and included, particularly young children, and that it's a shame that teachers are far too afraid to do that, because it may be necessary, but there are big losses in that. And I think that one reason why unhappiness and insecure identity is such a feature for young people is because of the stigma about physical touch and physical contact. There's no doubt that we all feel better. We might be feeling that we've got a slightly rough day and we're rather locked in, and someone just touches us on the shoulder, completely, can I say, innocently, or innocently of any sexual motive. And it just makes us feel better. It completely changes the whole basket in which we are living. And for children, it can be enormously gratifying and helpful. And a lot of children don't get hugs at home for all kinds of reasons. So one is the point about fear. Second is the point about, let me roll the next 2 points into one, which is that in Britain, the government has framed the discussion about it's either academic rigor with tests and exams, or it's all that fluffy rubbish about happiness and character and well-being and whatever tripe all that's about. And of course, that's so completely wrong, because wise people know that in any organization, the more the flourishing of the staff, or in this case, the more the flourishing of the kids and the staff, the students and the staff, the higher the productivity, including the better the exam performance and test performance. Happier children, as that beautiful quotation goes, perform better. When we do better when we are happy. So and the same in a factory or in a modern office. If the staff feel valued and treasured, they will want to do better. They want to be more diligent. They'll make less mistakes in hospitals. If there is a hectoring, bullying manager or doctor in charge, everyone's going to be afraid of mistakes, and surprise, surprise, they make more mistakes. So then if there is a supportive atmosphere. So it isn't either or. It isn't either rigor or nonsense, or it's nonsense. So let's put it another way. It's not rigor or empathy and compassion. It's empathy and compassion and rigor. And the more empathy we have, the more the performance goes up. So that would be my 2 quick responses.
Yes, and to frame that, you've thought and you've written and you've worked a lot on the wellness side of things. This is certainly not just a left brain conversation. I'll do a quick time check with you, Sir Anthony. What time do we have you until?
Can I just do a quick check here? I don't want to outstay my welcome with everybody. And 1 second. If we break at 12:15, is that too late? At 1:15, is that too late for you?
It's perfect. Yes, that's absolutely fine. I'll just to everybody else, I'll hold the call open for a while anyway, and we'll just get some reflections at that time. That's more than perfect. Should we take a question then from the chat, Jaisal, before I jump back in with some of my own?
Absolutely. I think there are a couple of questions, but there are 2 people who have almost asked the same question. So let's go in for that. And it's quite relevant to what we are talking now. So Maria has mentioned, what do you think are some key changes needed to modernize education? And along with that, Henry Langdon has asked, what is the one significant change you believe schools and our universities will implement within the next 5 years to better prepare young people for the new world of work? So I think these are about modernizing education and work both together. Yeah.
First one. Second was one big change, and Jaisal, the first one was more Maria's, I think. That question was more around what in particular?
It was about modernizing education. How do we think we can, what are the key changes needed?
Well, I think everybody, you're on this call because you're interested. And I think we should talk less about what we want them to do and more about what we can do. We can't do very much to affect those people in power taking decisions, but we can make an almighty difference in our own immediate spheres. And modernization, I think we have to do two things at the same time. We have to embrace in a considered way the new AI technologies, but we also have to double down on the human also. So I think that individuals need to keep abreast of what's happening and ensure that any change is deepening humanity, deepening compassion. The machines in 1,000 years' time will not be human. They won't have consciousness. And indeed, there'll come a rate at which they can no longer improve. We're years and years away from that happening. So I think what we can do is to double down on human values and integrate the technology in ways that highlight it. And the biggest single thing that universities can do, schools and colleges, universities, is to be aware of what's happening. It doesn't work to be an ostrich in this, sticking your head in the sand, which is what ostriches do, though I've never seen an ostrich stick their head in the sand, but I'm told and I believe it. And that's what so much of education is. We don't
I don't think
know
the
these
frog
things.
stays in the boiling water either, Sir Anthony, from what I've heard. But
but we have to be aware of what's happening. This is the biggest thing, as we were saying at the beginning. Where are we in that photograph, that early photograph, the Mercedes-Benz workforce? With a sort of, are they saying, well, I don't like all this, or I think I'm going to retire before it comes into effect, or if I close my eyes, it's not going to be there, or it will go away. And that's exactly what we've done in the last 25 years with social media. And the result is that the young people are deeply disturbed, and they will be for the rest of their life. Lasting damage has been done.
Yes.
I think that we have to get in there. We have to underline the human. We have to take our own humanity seriously. Richard's taken up yoga. True or false?
True.
I think we have to think about our own spiritual lives, our social lives, our own deep the cultural lives, our families. I mean, what really matters to us? We need to ground ourselves deeply in the human and in the human relationships with students and with colleagues, while at the same time really positively seeking out what's the new technological waves. We can't be like Canute. Does Canute, is that a cultural reference, Richard, that translates?
Do you want to say it?
So there was a king of England. Is this apocryphal or did he really happen? Did this anyone know the answer to that? Did King Canute, did this story really happen? Let's say it did. And there was a king of England who was told he was so powerful that even the incoming sea would reverse if he put his hand up and said no more. And he believed it, or he certainly was willing to go along with it. So his throne was taken down to the beach, to the shoreline, and he sat on it and told the waves to go back rather than to keep rolling on in. And you know what? They rolled back. No, they didn't. They carried on coming in. And we can't be like Canute. We can't say like so many people are doing, I don't want to know about this, or it's too big for me to understand, or it's too boring, or I'd sooner watch the Euro Cup finals, and maybe by the time I've stopped watching, this will all go away. We've got to positively seek it out, and think how we can shape it in our lives to improve our own lives. And frankly, limit the amount of time that you spend in front of these things, because these are destructive. Interesting example, one of my history colleagues took his group off. This is at the school here, Epsom College in south of London, and took his colleagues off a couple of weeks ago, no, two students off a couple of weeks ago to the First World War battle sites. And he said that because they were all had these machines, they got much less from the trip because they were all the time in between seeing things, on their machines. They weren't reflecting deeply. These things massively intrude into our lives, and so I think that we should watch ourselves, be careful of ourselves, recognize that things are happening in our own lives as well as in society's lives that we need to think about, and we have to be that change.
You've referenced social media a couple of times, and there's definitely big lessons to be learned from that. I remember that Google was hauled in front of Congress a few years back about a potential monopoly that they had. And the monopoly was in mobile search. They had something like 90% plus of all mobile searches. But they managed to convince the politicians that nobody searched on mobiles. The amount of search on mobiles was so insignificant compared to desktop that there was no point having an anti-monopolistic law on this. Roll the clock forward, of course, and they knew perfectly well, and now they have the search monopoly. Do you feel that politicians, and I don't know if you want to reference this, as UK politicians are going into this kind of discussion we're having here with their eyes open to the significance?
So I think that politicians globally, that we can only resolve this on an international level. And that we do have a remarkable body in the United Nations, but the United Nations finds it very difficult to get traction against powerful corporations and against powerful countries that don't want to play ball with it. So for national governments, they can introduce laws to try and ensure that these new technologies have their positive benefits maximized. But there are two problems with national governments, three problems. One is their reach is only nationally. Secondly, some of them are in bed with the corporations, the technology companies, and they are benefiting from those relationships. They're worried about being seen to counter them. Often they're linked to media, and governments are always very, very wary about doing anything to upset those with media power. And thirdly, the time horizon of politicians is the next general election in a democratic country. That's what they're thinking of. And the changes we're talking about are going to affect 10, 20, 25 years in the future. So it's beyond the interest, because it simply doesn't compute with them. So those are, we have to rely on politicians, but don't expect too much. I think that's why, Richard, I've set up this group called AI in Education that is all about the sector itself, teachers itself, globally coming together and saying, this is good AI, this is bad AI, and trying to shape it, bend it, swerve the products in the interests of deep education, demanding education, appropriate education, and which minimize the downsides, and which try and gear it towards the least advantaged, the benefits, because it's the least advantaged who always lose out. So that body which, do you know this or not? I can't remember. I set it up just over a year ago. It's called AI in Education. And it's a great group it's run by the profession, for the profession and for students and parents, and governors and others involved in education. So it's by them, for them, and with them.
Just picking up on a question from Jeff, who's just recently left at OU. Is there any particular leadership you see around this from the UK or Europe?
So the OU is in Milton Keynes, is obviously doing fantastic work, and we have this conference next week, this AI and education group with the Open University. There are leaders. Often they tend to be this or that university, or this or that university department, or this or that school or college. To the best of my knowledge, you're obviously doing great work. Also, we are the only UK-based group which is bringing together, in a charitable way, not-for-profit way, those who are most directly involved in AI, to try and ensure that it's going to, could go back to the book cover I showed you, that it's going to enhance humanity and civilization rather than restrict it.
Yes. I've just been putting a link there to the chat. That conference looks fantastic. Is there still opportunities to register for that?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Great.
We'd love online, or however, we'd love to see you there.
I know we've got a few people here from the area around Milton Keynes and Bletchley.
I know.
Yeah.
I saw that. Fantastic.
Yeah, so
the
it's
best area of the country.
Well, we are biased, but yes. Wonderful. So I said I'd ask you a couple of those questions that I loaded up, but before we get to that, just thinking about those teachers, there's an expression going around called the doomers and the gloomers, and the boomers, I think they're called, in terms of people's perceptions on AI and the influence it will have. But you've got teachers absolutely that aren't au fait with this or aren't familiar with this. You've got teachers that are embracing it. You've got teachers, and I've heard this directly, and I'm sure others have too, who are sort of pondering their existence and saying, is anything that I'm teaching relevant anymore? How do I set my students up for the future of work when I don't even know what the future of work looks like? That's fear again, isn't it, though?
Yeah. I mean, we've never known what the future is like. I mean, the only people who know what the future is like is fortune tellers, and they end up making so much money that then they no longer have to bother what the future's like. I mean, we've never known what the future's like, and that shouldn't be a reason for not doing our best and following our better, or our best natures. It's uncertain, but we know that human agency is all important. A criticism of education at the moment is that it suppresses agency rather than encourages it. The students have to learn the right answer and the right time in the right way, and then reproduce that in the exams. And that's not what human experience is like. Just Richard, that first part of the question there, just trying to tease out points there, just looking at the question that you asked.
Yeah, that variation is huge, isn't it, across the sector?
Yes, inevitably, but we have to embrace it. We simply have to embrace what's happening. It won't go away, and we can't be Canutes, and we have to work together. We have to be positive about it. We have to shape it in the interests of what is best about humanity, not what's worst about humanity. And it can be incredibly enriching. So I've been on the board of the Royal Shakespeare Company, and there the benefits with Shakespeare of AI and mixed reality and virtual reality is enormous. The ability to be there on the stage and interweave around the actors, to be part of the action, to play out possible alternative scenarios, or to be in a sonnet, and to be in this ethereal, beautiful world, unimaginable world, to fly to the island in Tempest. I mean, it is, or to conduct scientific experiments, or to do sociological and philosophical and economic modeling, that business modeling, way beyond the imagination of any, or possibility of any class. It's so exciting what it can do and offer. And if good people abandon the space, then the bad guys will take over.
Modernization critical, whether that's Shakespeare, the church, perhaps. You've worked at some institutions with some serious history behind them, Sir Anthony, Wellington and now Epsom, where you're covering for some time. I'm curious, what are the actual rules, if you can share some of them, in Epsom College about students using ChatGPT and other
So, I
platforms?
mean, we can't stop them using ChatGPT, can we? And we have quite tight rules about screens for up to the 16-year-olds. They're not allowed them throughout the school day. And we have various voluntary codes in practice to try and reduce the number and the amount and volume of screen time, to make it smarter, to make it more effective. And so we need to have human activities which engage young people, provide the opportunities for them to do such activities and learning, and tear them away, or persuade them, nudge them away from the screens. However exciting computer games are at the moment, they will become far more exciting when the game itself personalizes itself to the personality of the user. Of course, you can see in that risks with gambling. Already, those with addictive genes, and if there are people who have the insecure attachments, and that's aligned to those who have a bent towards addiction, they are vulnerable in that Venn diagram overlap. And then if you throw into that AI with the ability to personalize it and to find out what pleases the person, with gambling or with pornography, is going to have a hugely corrosive effect on the ability of young males, or not just young males, but also women, to interact with others of the opposite, or indeed the same gender, and have meaningful personal relationships. It can be enormously damaging when the reality can appear to be rather disappointing and less exciting, and certainly a lot more messy than the possibilities online. And so we need to come back to human, not just humanity, but notions of human goodness and human empathy, which enhance relationships rather than objectifies them, which is what pornography does, and gambling almost objectifies ourselves. And any form of objectification is a betrayal of subjectivization, which lies at the heart of human relationships.
Yeah, from what I see of pornography, it seems to be far more about power and control of people over other people than anything to do with sexuality these days. And I worry about the normalization of things like that. Well, when we think about the most heinous crimes in society, our minds go to things that happen to children, and the reason for that is that we recognize the vulnerability of children. But I would argue, and Marcus is on the call, we've spoken about this before, that I think we're equally vulnerable to exactly what you've been describing cognitively. And so I think an acknowledgement that we are very easy to manipulate by algorithms. It's not even difficult technologically to do that. Leaves us very exposed. And I think a sort of global recognition of that is important. It's
We
not
are, we
difficult,
are,
and we're very vulnerable.
we are very vulnerable. We're all vulnerable, even in pre-AI, um, to being influenced. And look at what's happening in America with Donald Trump persuading people
It's
of
not
things that are,
difficult.
of not. It's not difficult, and that's even before you have AI deep fakes personalizing on the
Mm.
screen, having Richard your face telling people what to be doing in a very persuasive, personalized way. The technology knows our vulnerabilities, and the moment the technology is pre-AI technology is just uniform for everybody, but when it personalizes, it becomes lethal. And for many people will be unstoppable unless we can help people, ground people. And it's with jobs, it's not just it isn't just the jobs some will disappear. It's also the satisfaction of the jobs, and I do think that the I think London taxi system is unusual in that the drivers are required to memorize the whole street maps of London, and they can spend 3, 4, 5, 6 years learning every single street map, every single street, and every single building, and then they use that in to guide, and it's that specialist knowledge that you're paying for. But since these screens appear, on everybody's dashboard, and it tells you where to go, the knowledge they had is now useless. And these are AI machines. They are adapting in real time to what's happening in streets in front of you that the driver cannot possibly know about. So they're making the knowledge, and therefore the brains are changing back from the taxi drivers, where they were expanded because of all the mental activity going on. They're now withdrawing. We are into a big retreat if we're not careful. So we have to take all this seriously. I wonder, Richard, if that's probably enough. I'm worried I've been a bit low energy on this call, but I've tried to listen to the excellent questions and deal with them individually.
Anthony, we're honored to have you here, and not at all would I say that. I think, we started the session with 50 and we're at 48. I think we're hanging on your words here, so not at all. And we prefer realism. We're not looking for rah-rah. We want to get
Okay,
a
so
real
I'm going to
perspective.
summarize. We have to work together. We have to share. We have to have real information. We have to share. We have to work it through together. We have to be optimistic. We have to be aware. We have to be together. And I think with those three things, aware of what's happening, not like ostriches or Canute. I think if we share rather than hoard and try and be the best ourselves or the best institution, so we've got to be collaborative. And we have to be positive, because pessimism begets pessimism and defeat.
Yes.
Optimism is much more life enhancing, energy giving. You know what it's like being around somebody who's optimistic. They've just got much more energy. Now you can say, what's the causality there? Do they have lots of energy, therefore they're optimistic, or do they have lots of are they optimistic because which way does it flow? So but those three things, and and by the way, I am optimistic. I think that in 25 years' time, life will be enormously richer than it is now.
Well, I can see that you're an optimist and you are very positive about this, but that doesn't need to be framed in hype and nonsense, really. And I think we've always tried to have that
No,
credo here.
absolutely no, and you've got it brilliantly, and it is you've got it absolutely brilliantly. We have to be realists. We have to be optimists but realists. We can't be closed-eyed, la la, living in a la la land of everything's going to be lovely, because you know what? There's at least a 50-50 that we're not going to be able to get this right.
Yeah, and there's plenty to be worried about in the world, no doubt about that. But if I was a young person today, and I love this quote that I'm not sure where it came from, that we've had the world's knowledge in our pocket for a decade now. And now we have a guide. What an exciting time to be going into the world of work or being a student. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining, all 48 of you. Thank you. It's been really great to talk. And my apologies for that technical, but who solved the technical problem at the beginning? A human being came along. There you are.
We'd love to stay in
everybody.
touch. Thanks again.
Very good. Very, very, very nice to talk to you all.
And you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.